I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Here's a check of first word news. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is calling President Trump's plan to impose U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum, quote, absolutely unacceptable. Speaking in Ontario Friday, Prime Minister Trudeau said it makes no sense to highlight Canada or Canadian steel or aluminum as a potential security threat. EU and Asian leaders also condemn the move. The families of the 58 people killed are getting $275,000 from a $31 million fund that started as a GoFundMe effort. The Las Vegas Victims Fund said today that 10 other people who were paralyzed or suffered brain damage in the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history will also be paid. The CEO of Delta Airlines says the carrier isn't taking sides in the national debate over guns. That's after Georgia lawmakers voted to punish Delta for discontinuing promotional discounts for NRA members. Republicans voted to kill a jet fuel tax break that would have directly benefited Atlanta-based Delta. Funeral services were held in Charlotte, North Carolina Friday for the Reverend Billy Graham. President and Mrs. Trump and Vice President and Mrs. Pence led mourners at the Billy Graham Library. Graham died last week at the age of 99. In New York, I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
And this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, food delivery startup DoorDash gets a giant cash infusion from SoftBank. The CEO of the newly minted tech unicorn joins us this hour. Plus, Mark Carney's crackdown on cryptocurrency. The Bank of England governor didn't mince words on Bloomberg today about holding the virtual currency ecosystem more accountable. Amazon dives deeper into music with Alexa playing DJ. Our look at Amazon's rise in an industry that could hit $41 billion by 2030. First, to our lead. In the massively competitive food delivery space, DoorDash just got a big leg up. SoftBank's Vision Fund is leading a $535 million investment in the San Francisco-based company, valuing the startup at $1.4 billion. The company is taking on Uber Eats, Postmates, and a cast of other competitors. DoorDash CEO Tony Xu joins me now here in the studio for a first on Bloomberg interview. Tony, great to have you.
It's great to be here.
That's a lot of money for a startup. You know, what do you think justifies this kind of cash?
Well, the investment really matches the size of the ambition and the opportunity. There's over $200 billion that happens in restaurant takeout sales every year, and only 5% of it is online today. 95% of the time, a customer is still placing an order through a phone call or walking inside the store. And our goal at DoorDash is to not only serve those customers, but also go beyond restaurants and build a last-mile logistics platform in every city.
So how do you plan to spend it? Where will you invest this money?
You'll see us invested in three primary areas. The first is really building on the amount of selection and restaurants that we offer. We offer delivery from 90% of the top 100 restaurants who offer delivery today. We plan on building there. Second, we want to grow the number of cities that we're in today. Today we're in 600 cities. You'll see us be serving over 1,600 cities by the end of the year. And finally, we'll be doubling down on the DoorDash Drive platform, which allows any merchant to offer delivery directly through their own website.
Can you talk to me about your regional sort of distribution? I mean, what areas are you more popular? I mean, is it urban areas? Is it the middle of the country? Where are people using it?
So DoorDash started in the Bay Area, but since we've grown tremendously to over 600 cities covering 50 metros, and we found a model to work in all sorts of cities of all shapes, geographies, smaller cities, larger cities. The truth of the matter is every customer in any zip code eats 20 times a week, and we want to serve them all.
So the landscape is very competitive, and there's like a graveyard of companies that didn't make it in this space. And I'm curious what sets your business model apart from Postmates or Uber Eats, and why you think this can be a long-term sustainable business.
From the beginning, we've always had a merchant-first approach. We've always worked on serving the restaurants and integrating into their system so we can be as efficient as possible. As a result, we were able to prove out that model. So in the past year, the company became contribution margin positive, which means that we got our earliest markets profitable, our newer markets are achieving profitability even faster. And it was only when we figured out how to operationalize the model did we go out and raise this amount of money.
So how do you differ from Postmates? How do you differ from Uber Eats?
We work very closely with the restaurants that we serve, and the differentiation really comes when you look at the amount of selection of restaurants that we offer. We deliver from over 100,000 stores across the US and Canada, and we deliver from more of the top 100 restaurant brands than all of our peers combined.
And what's interesting about DoorDash is you also enable restaurants to deliver food directly to you without ever knowing that DoorDash was involved, right?
Absolutely. So through the DoorDash Drive platform, restaurants can offer delivery through their own website, their own phone system, or their own app, and a dasher from the DoorDash platform will fulfill that order.
Now, there were reports that the negotiations with SoftBank took a long time. You know, in the past, I know we've covered some of your fundraising struggles. You know, what were the sort of sticking points to get here?
Well, there were a lot of parties involved. We raised money from SoftBank, Sequoia, and GIC. And when you're talking about this size investment, you have to take a very responsible approach in having a set of conversations to make sure there's a need, to raise that amount of money. And it was only in those dynamic conversations after all of us agreed on a shared vision on how to pursue the massive opportunity in front of us.
Our Caroline Hyde caught up with Rajiv Misra, the CEO of the Vision Fund, in Barcelona earlier this week and asked about just how SoftBank having this much money is impacting the investment landscape, impacting the startup ecosystem from a big picture. Take a listen to what he had to say.
It'll be good for them if the valuations go up because they can exit at those prices. And a lot of the early investors have exited, predominantly have exited with our investment because we do both primary and secondary, buy out secondary shares, including in Uber, in Didi, in WeWorks, where early investors exited and sold secondary shares to the Vision Fund.
There's been a question of whether SoftBank having this much money to plow into the startup ecosystem is actually good for companies and good for other investors. What do you think?
I think it really depends on the ambitions of the company. If you're trying to build a multi-generational company like DoorDash and you want to become the last mile logistics layer in every city, it's going to take a really long time. And as a part of that process, you invite different types of investors at different phases of a company's life. And we're very, very happy with the 3 investors that participated in our last round.
I mean, this kind of money is catalytic for a company of your size, and I'm curious what you feel now is your responsibility to, no pun intended, deliver, and make sure that this really does get you to the next phase.
We have a lot of work in front of us, absolutely. We plan, of course, on spending it with the same discipline that we've always had. And again, it's better serving the customers on the DoorDash platform. We have to triple the geography. We will be adding more products to accelerate the roadmap and better serving the merchants, the consumers, and the Dashers at DoorDash.
So where will DoorDash be in 2 years?
In 2 years, DoorDash will be in every city in North America. And you will see us deliver both restaurant orders as well as beyond restaurants.
All right. Tony Xu, CEO of DoorDash, thank you so much
for
stopping by. Great to have you. All right, well, Rovio, maker of Angry Birds, plunged as much as 14% in Helsinki after it said its head of games is leaving. The sell-off came a week after Rovio lost half its market value after disappointing earnings results and a disappointing outlook. Rovio is also shutting down its London studio and laying off the staff in that office. Coming up, New York versus Silicon Valley. 3 female venture capitalists explain why the East Coast is making strides in investment diversity. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Ventures says it's raising its goal to hire more women to 43% by 2019. In a blog, the company also announced women made up 38.4% of employees as of December 2017. That exceeded its goal, but just slightly. And Bridgewater's Ray Dalio, meantime, praised CEO Jack Dorsey for his recent commitment to make conversation on Twitter more healthy. In a series of tweets, Dalio told Dorsey, quote, "You're taking an inevitably great step by making it clear that you're on a mission to have more open and thoughtful disagreement." He also offered to help in any way. Well, in the latest Cornell Tech Bloomberg series, Bloomberg Scarlet Fu moderated a conversation of venture capitalists, including Rebecca Caden, partner at Union Square Ventures, Beth Ferreira, managing director at Firstmark Capital, and Graycroft's Ellie Wheeler. They talked about the environment for women in their industry. They account for just 7% of investors at top venture firms, and the current funding cycle. Take a listen.
What you've seen is a tremendous amount of capital at the later stages. You've seen a delay in things going public because they don't have to. Right. And you've seen a lot of people who used to play in the later stage game come earlier, and everyone else subsequently also go earlier. So what we've had is probably a few vintages that might be really awful over time. Who knows? We're in a business where feedback cycles are 10 years long. So we won't know for a little while what these things are going to look at. What I can say is that since late 2014, early 2015, we've been talking about how there's going to be a correction. So it's also like if you predict it often enough, eventually you're right. There's a lot of that going around. Yeah, it's like you predicted the last 18 recessions, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that happening. I mean, prices have been high. There's a lot of capital, and there's a lot of really awesome things happening. But the venture ecosystem is such an oddity and really kind of a lagging indicator. What's going on in the stock market doesn't affect us today. It doesn't affect us for quite some time. The things we're investing in today are probably going to exit in 7 to 10 years, so it's rather irrelevant. Although you, of course, are thinking about generally how something's going to be valued, the two things are just pretty different.
I mean, it's interesting when you think about pricing today. If you think about pricing versus 3 or 4 years ago, if you're coming in at 3x what you might have paid 2 or 3 years ago, you're probably not going to exit at 3x, and so those returns are going to get squeezed. Yep. And we're just trying to figure out how do we get squeezed the least.
New York is a smaller ecosystem than Silicon Valley. What is the definition of success in the New York venture scene versus in Silicon Valley?
I think the definition of success increasingly is converging, which I think is a very important thing to happen in New York, right? And I think, even in the last year or so, New York has seen very powerful outcomes. I think, Flatiron Health recently is a very powerful outcome for New York, MongoDB. It makes it really interesting. And I think where I'm excited to see New York go, and the difference that I see here is Silicon Valley is structured to dream very big and to have a definition of success that fuels support for the irrational and for the idea that, I always put it this way, like when Facebook got that $1 billion acquisition offer from Yahoo, if they were in New York, would they have taken it? And I think we've seen a little bit of that in New York. Yep. That you're in an ecosystem where that is such extreme success, which it is. Like, I'll take $1 billion outcome all day long as an investor. But does that prevent some companies from feeling the pressure to be the $10 billion company and to be the $100 billion company? And that's important to have in an ecosystem, not only for the financial results and the equity value results, but for a lot of things. Those are the companies that create pillars of an ecosystem that fuel the talent. Mm-hmm. If you think about the percent of innovation in Silicon Valley that's come out of Google and Facebook and PayPal, sometimes as whole teams. And fueled that ecosystem there, it's really, really meaningful. And I don't know that New York has had as much of that yet. I think we're headed in that direction. But I think, the first step is to have a whole bunch of these, $1 billion to $2 billion outcomes. And I'm excited to see some of these become the more pillar kinds of companies of New York.
Mm-hmm. Beth, what do you think?
No, I think that's absolutely true. I think we're just starting to see the second generation of entrepreneurs here in New York build businesses and go after those big outcomes. But it's a smaller ecosystem. Mm-hmm. I think there's some things that are great about New York, we're a much more diverse ecosystem. So you have lots of industries here where companies that are in insurance or fintech or in media they can pull from the other industries to staff their companies, and so which Silicon Valley doesn't have. And I think that's why you're seeing a much more diverse workforce here than there is in Silicon Valley. We have more women in the tech sector. On a percent basis, we probably have more women VCs here, and I think that's all positive.
That was some of the Cornell Tech at Bloomberg panel with Rebecca Caden from Union Square Ventures, Beth Ferreira, as well as First Mark Capital and Graycroft's Ellie Wheeler. Well, a former recruiter is suing Google, alleging an anti-white and anti-Asian bias. The suit alleges that the ex-employee was fired for not towing the line, rejecting white and Asian male job candidates in favor of Latino, African-American, and female applicants. The claimant, Aaron Wilberg, worked at Google for 9 years as both a contractor and an employee. He also alleges that late last year, management deleted emails and other digital records of diversity requirements. A Google spokesperson said the company will vigorously defend itself against the suit and that they hire on merit, not identity. Coming up, Google is eyeing 40 acres of prime California real estate, but local residents are protesting. We talk about whether the tech giant will win this real estate battle next. And if you like Bloomberg News and have a Bloomberg terminal, check out TV Go. You can watch us online, click on our charts and graphics, and interact with us directly over the IB. Just go to TV Go on your terminal. You can also contact us on Twitter at Emily Chang TV. Check out TikTok by Bloomberg as well, the first 24-hour global news network streaming live on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.
So you want to be a YouTuber? It might not be the road to riches you think it is.
I'm Lisa Fleischer and I work for Bloomberg in London. A lot of kids these days say they want to be YouTubers when they grow up. It's not much different than the dreams of becoming a Hollywood star or a famous athlete, but the reality is it's incredibly difficult to make it into a real career. In fact, the vast majority of people posting videos won't make enough in advertising revenue to make it out of poverty. YouTube ad rates vary widely, but a good rule of thumb is $1 per 1,000 views, according to people in the business. To make it into the top 3% of most watched channels, you have to get over 1 million views a month, according to research out of Germany. But YouTubers who get 1 million views a month, really the elite we're talking about here, might only make about $16,800 a year from advertising. That's just about where the federal poverty guideline is for a 2-person household. Of course, the goal is to be a superstar, and stars like Jake Paul and Zoella are able to get sponsorship deals. Their videos are about daily lives, fashion, video games. YouTube says it's continuing to roll out new ways to help creators make money. I'm Lisa for TikTok News. You can follow me on Twitter at Lisa Fleischer. Get the latest updates at TikTok.
Well, the tech industry has fueled a real estate transformation in and around San Francisco the last few years. Soaring prices and a housing crunch have brought on a host of new issues for government officials and tech companies. Now, Alphabet, which is Silicon Valley's biggest property owner, is hoping to buy 40 acres in San Jose. Rob Urban, who covers real estate for Bloomberg News, joins us now from New York with more on this story. So, Rob, a lot of property here. Google, obviously a huge owner in this area, but also some pushback from local residents. What is happening?
Well, the San Jose officials believe that they have gotten the downside of all the tech development and not any of the upside, because they haven't really snagged a giant like Google. They are a bedroom community. It's the 10th largest city in the United States, and more people sleep there than work there. They are sort of the suburb to Mountain View and Cupertino and Menlo Park and Palo Alto.
So why wouldn't they want Google to move in?
Well, because of the concern that it will just drive up property prices that much further. They what they're looking at is a 40-acre site that the city owns. They originally were they were talking about attracting the Oakland A's baseball team. That's why they have the property. Now it's part of a redevelopment that involves a train station there that will be expanded. It'll have a BART line. They're talking about high-speed rail, all kinds of things, which is, of course, another another major problem from all the development in Silicon Valley is transportation. So it'll be at the center of it, and the concern is that the people who have been left behind by the massive housing boom will be that much further left behind once Google comes to town. The answer to that from Google and from the city is that they will build houses. Ultimately, there will be about 20,000 jobs. The city itself is talking about building as much as 25,000 housing units. Google itself will be financing or involved in building several thousand of those, 15 to 20% affordable.
Google already has headquarters in San Francisco, in Mountain View, just a bit further south, and then San Jose would be even farther south. What is Google actually planning to put there?
Well, they haven't actually said at this point precisely what the jobs will be. Google is, in fact, the biggest commercial property owner in the Bay Area. Mountain View is huge, and they have already gotten involved in some plans to build housing in Mountain View as well, 10,000 units. So it's kind of a next step for tech companies to respond to the soaring housing prices by adding to supply. They've brought in a lot of employees, but the construction industry hasn't kept up.
And just quickly, can you compare obviously we know prices are incredibly high in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley. How does that compare to the real estate prices in San Jose?
San Jose is actually, strange to say, one of the cheaper places. I think the median home price is like $1.2 million or something like that, a little bit less than that. In Palo Alto, it's over $3 million. For $1 million. I actually talked to a broker in the Palo Alto area. He showed me a house that was like $2 million, and I said, wow, why is it so cheap? He said, well, nobody will live there. It's a tear down. They'll buy the property, build something much bigger. He was talking about starter homes, $2 to $3 million. So San Jose theoretically is cheaper. There's very limited supply. It's the city itself is stretched because in California, it's difficult to raise property taxes.
All right, well, we'll keep following that story. Bloomberg's Rob Urban, thank you so much for that update. Coming up, the governor of the Bank of England takes on cryptocurrencies, why and how he wants to end the anarchy of the digital currency world next. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Here's a check of First Word News. The United Nations Human Rights Council decided Friday to hold what it called an urgent debate about the violence in a rebel-held region of eastern Damascus that has faced brutal airstrikes. The debate was proposed by Britain, which launched an expedited push at the council for greater scrutiny of the bloodshed in Syria's eastern Ghouta region.
I ask colleagues here today, how can this council not respond? Despite the UN Security Council resolution of the 24th of February, serious violations have continued on a wide scale, including repeated airstrikes of civilians, causing many deaths.
And the head of the Human Rights Council said the violence and killings in eastern Ghouta and across Syria likely amount to war crimes. British Prime Minister Theresa May on Friday delivered her post-Brexit vision for the UK. She also proposed maintaining UK membership with some key EU regulatory agencies.
Associate membership of these agencies is the only way to meet our objective of ensuring that these products only need to undergo one series of approvals in one country. Second, these agencies have a critical role in setting and enforcing relevant rules. And if we were able to negotiate associate membership, we will be able to ensure that we could continue to provide our technical expertise.
And the chemicals, aviation, and medical agencies are regulated at an EU level. The Spanish government is dismissing the latest efforts by Catalan separatists to advance their independence bid, with Madrid saying today that a planned Catalan government in exile would have no legal authority. That's after Catalonia's fugitive ex-leader, Carles Puigdemont, released a video message saying that separatists exiled in Belgium plan to create a Catalan shadow government. It's a big weekend for Europe on its political calendar. Two votes that wrap Sunday could set the tone for the future landscape of the European Union. Italy holds a national election. A win by the anti-Europe establishment Five Star Party is seen as the biggest risk to the euro and Italian bond spreads. Germany's center-left Social Democratic Party also announces the result of its vote to decide whether to join a grand coalition with Chancellor Angela Merkel and her center-right Christian Democratic Union. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. In New York, I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. The head of the Bank of England had some strong words today about the need for stronger cryptocurrency regulation. In a speech at Bloomberg's London headquarters, Governor Mark Carney called for rules to end the, quote, anarchy he sees in the crypto market. The time has come to hold the crypto asset ecosystem to the same standards as the rest of the financial system, Carney said. He lauded the potential value of blockchain technology, but said digital currencies have failed as a form of money. He expanded on those thoughts as he spoke to Bloomberg after the speech. Take a listen.
There's sort of three ways to measure a currency. First, is it a store of value? Is it reliable? Does it hold a stable value? I mean, clearly, anyone who looks at on your Bloomberg screen the volatility of Bitcoin, it's 10 times more volatile than sterling. It's not a stable core hold of value. But I think the most important thing is that actually working as a medium of exchange, how well can you use it to buy goods? It's not that efficient. For example, it costs about 1.5 pence to use cash, 8 pence to use a debit card in the UK, swipe cards, your iPhone. It costs about £2 to use Bitcoin on a transaction basis. You layer on top of that the environmental cost and other factors. It's just not that good at doing what it's supposed to do, but it does point the way in many respects to the future of money, and that's what's interesting. So there's a glass half empty. We're not worried about it displacing sterling or the US dollar or other conventional currencies, fiat money, but it does throw a challenge, these cryptocurrencies throw a challenge to central banks and those who oversee payments systems and markets of how to reorganize those to better serve customers.
Yeah, and you did zero in on the payment system aspect of the technology in your speech, and this sort of vision of us sitting in the pub doing simultaneously clearing the price of the drinks using this technology. How do you see that? That's about just getting rid of the middleman in financial transactions. Yeah,
I mean, so part of the genius, if you will, of cryptocurrencies is that, as we all know, they're distributed. They cut out the central banks, they cut out the banks, and they're ideally directly peer-to-peer between you and I. And so the challenge for payment systems is to move in that direction, so we can instantaneously move money from my account to your account to the publican's account, the guy who runs the pub, directly. And what we're doing at the Bank of England is we're reorganizing the core of the system in a way that allows new payment providers to just plug in. They could be using distributed ledger technology, they can use other technologies, and we're in a position where these innovative so-called PSPs will be able to provide those types of services. You're seeing similar innovation amongst banks in the US, other places, and so this is coming, and as I say, that's the challenge that we have to meet. We have to meet the challenge of what these cryptocurrencies are trying to do. They're not doing it that well, but they do point the way to the future.
We'll talk a bit about what you said about regulation of Bitcoin, but I just want to go back on that a little bit, because you talked about this is the thing you're most positive about to do with cryptocurrencies is getting rid of these very high transaction costs in effect that we have from these day-to-day transactions. If you're JP Morgan or any financial institution, you're basically saying you think the most positive thing about this technology is it can get rid of all the profits that you make as a financial intermediary intermediary. Is that basically where you're going?
Well, I'm not going to speak for individual financial institutions, but I think the best of the financial institutions can see the direction of where the payment system is going to go in a market.
Which means making a lot less money.
A lot less money from payment system, maybe more money from understanding their customers better, more money from from providing other core banking services. But look, payment costs are going to keep going down. The profits from this business, I would expect, will go down, and the service to customers is going to improve. That's a good thing, and it's always been the case in financial services that the banks and non-banks innovate. This innovation, the cryptocurrency innovation, is pushing others. It's certainly this generation of cryptocurrencies, I think it's very safe to say, is not the answer to the questions that they're posing.
Now, for more thoughts on Carney's comments and the crypto space, let's go live to London, where Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde is standing by. So, Caroline, what do you make of the fact that he seems to believe in the underlying power of the technology, but doesn't necessarily believe it's good as a cash alternative, if you will?
Exactly. I mean, in one way, he was quite damning, saying that the cryptocurrencies or crypto assets, as he kept calling them, in your wallet at the moment, well, they're not the future. They're not going to replace the pound or the dollar, the fiat currencies. And he's also worried about the volatility, in some measures 25 times the volatility that we see in US equities. He's worried about that. That is why he wants to bring in regulation, particularly of the exchanges that we're talking about. But he did sing the praises of the underlying blockchain technology. And that's why he's saying, look, they're reorganizing the very business of the Bank of England to allow what he called the genius of crypto assets, which is peer-to-peer transactions. We know, in fact, that they've employed Ripple. They've been working with the disintermediated ledger company Ripple to test out this sort of blockchain technology at the BOE, and they showed some sort of tests back in 2017. So he's willing to look at the underlying tech, but perhaps not the cryptocurrencies as they stand.
Put this into context for us. How do the moves of the Bank of England, how do they impact what happens around the rest of the world?
I think it's interesting because plenty of regulators have been speaking out. You've got the UK wanting to bring the sort of financial eyes that they apply to the financial institutions and ecosystem onto crypto assets, as he keeps calling it. And on your side of the pond, the United States has been doing it as well. I mean, ad hoc nature, piecemeal in many ways. You've got the SEC, for example, looking at ICOs, the so-called initial coin offerings. You've got them also keeping their eye out on other key areas of the business. They're perhaps worried about exchange-traded funds that, remember, the Winklevoss twins were looking to bring in March. They said no. Other applications have come forward. They're not giving it the green light for ETFs until they get some clarification of consumer protections. Similarly, we've seen from the CFTC, though, they've actually said, look, we're willing to see futures contracts. That's a new area that we've seen brought in, but they're looking at Bitfinex, one of the key exchanges. They're worried about Tether, the token that is related to Bitfinex and its relationship to the US dollar. And then you've got other countries, though. US looks to be clamping down, some taking even more significant steps. Mexico, just 2 days ago, it looks as though it's going to just be one presidential signing of the letter away from regulation in Mexico. We've got South Korea clamping down. China, that was the biggest area of Bitcoin transactions. They've really tightened the belts, driving away exchanges, driving away transactions. But then others, open arms. Japan, they like it. They're actually legalizing it to a certain extent. They've got 16 exchanges that they've legitimized. And, well, Switzerland, get this, they want to be a cryptocurrency nation. So Switzerland's clearly trying to welcome this.
All right, Caroline Hyde, of course, obviously so much volatility. We'll be interested to see if these comments have an impact. Caroline Hyde for us in London. Okay, coming up, from electric cars that drive themselves to cars that drive themselves, the way we drive is changing dramatically. What it will take to make sure that our automotive future is a smooth ride. Next, this is Bloomberg. Late last year, Facebook said it would create a tool to show users if they liked or shared Russian propaganda. But that's not enough for a group of Washington lawmakers. Now, a bipartisan group of senators is saying that Facebook needs to notify each user that viewed content on the Russian-based Internet Research Agency backpage or ad. The current Facebook tool is a passive one that users have to seek out on their own. Well, the future of automotive transportation could be at an inflection point as ride-sharing, self-driving, and electric cars are becoming a larger part of everyday life. And proponents of those technologies are pointing to a future that promises reduced traffic, cleaner emissions, and easier access to rides for all. But is that really the case? Well, a new book called 3 Revolutions says that none of that is guaranteed without proper action from policymakers. I'd like to welcome the author and director of the Institute of Transportation Studies at the University of California, Davis, Professor Daniel Sperling, joining us now on the show. Professor Sperling, thank you so much for joining us. So, in a way, businesses like Uber and Lyft wouldn't exist if they didn't flout the law in the early days, but in some cases, they've taken it too far. I mean, Uber is on the receiving end of a couple of federal investigations at this point. What is wrong with that picture?
Well, the picture is that they really are the first step towards this better future, a necessary step. They've really opened the door to using smartphones and these information technology routes to make it easier to access high-quality transportation.
So how do you think regulators should be approaching ride-sharing? Let's start with that.
I think it's a simple story, and that is what they should be doing is encouraging and favoring pooling rides. In other words, Uber runs a service called Uber Pool, Lyft has Lyft Line, there's other kinds of microtransit services like Via, and what we need to be doing is getting as many people as possible onto those pooling services. So we need policies to encourage it. And the good news is we're not swimming upstream. Those companies are very positive and supportive of that.
And what about when it comes to self-driving? Farther into the future, but in some cases happening now.
Yeah, in some cases it is happening now. There are a number of cars you can buy that will go down the freeways under their own control and steering. I wouldn't advise it for very long, but it's the first step. The partial automation is here. What we're really aiming towards is full automation, fully driverless. And it is going to happen. And the market is pulling it. People like it. The companies are really committed to it. So it's going to happen.
When is it going to happen?
If I knew the answer to that, I'd be a very rich person. There are companies and people saying there will be driverless cars in 2 or 3 years. They're possibly right, but it would be only in a very limited area and would be geo-fenced. And so in that case, companies like Uber and Lyft find that very attractive, and they might do it. An individual, you wouldn't want an automated car that you can only use within a small area. So for individual purchase, it'll probably be longer. But I can see it in 3 or 4 years in very limited applications. It'll be a while, though, before it's available in a mass market way and widely available and able to be used in a larger area.
So what do you think the tipping point will be in order for self-driving cars to become more mainstream?
The tipping point is when the regulators approve it, frankly, because people will buy it. The costs have to come down. The costs are coming down quickly, but as soon as it's commercialized, those costs are going to drop dramatically. It'll take a few years, so it's really as soon as the regulators really allow these cars to be operated really driverless, it will take off. But there'll be steps along the way.
How optimistic are you about the Trump administration laying the groundwork for the rules that you believe need to be in place in order for this future to happen?
I think there's a tendency in Washington with the regulators and the Trump administration to in fact fast track it. And there's some concerns that they're doing it actually too fast. So there's going to be questions that states and others are going to raise that is the technology really ready? And frankly, it comes down to what's our tolerance for crashes. You get the technology out there, and the first time there's a few crashes, there's going to be a PR disaster, and that could block it. So there's this tension between supporting and nurturing innovation, but on doing it in a way that is acceptable for the public arena.
All right, Professor Dan Sperling of UC Davis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, the way we listen to music is changing, and thanks in part to smart speakers. We'll talk to the man who wants to take Amazon Music to the top of the charts. This is Bloomberg. Amazon is looking to expand its presence in Latin America beyond Mexico and Brazil. The e-commerce giant is recruiting for 8 full-time positions in Argentina. They're tied to its Amazon Web Services cloud computing business. Amazon has been expanding its cloud infrastructure across the globe as more companies pay to have their data and applications hosted remotely. This helps reduce costs and improve data speed by not having to rely on sites outside the country. Well, when it comes to the top of the music streaming charts, Spotify holds the top spot, followed by Apple Music, but rising up the list with a bullet, and currently in third place is none other than Amazon Music. And in an industry that Goldman Sachs expects to hit $41 billion by 2030, Amazon has, well, a not-so-secret weapon in its musical catalog, Amazon Alexa, and its line of Echo voice command speakers. I spoke with the Vice President of Amazon Music, Steve Boom, to see just how Alexa is changing the way people listen to music.
It's a huge part of Amazon Music. I mean, of course, Alexa finds itself first on smart speakers, and the thing that people want to do first and foremost on these devices is listen to music. And it's been a big part of our business ever since it launched.
Amazon Music is something you get with a Prime membership. Is Prime driving subscriptions and driving growth?
It is, and we actually have 2 tiers of Amazon Music. So you get, with your Prime membership, Prime Music, which gives you access to about 2 million songs. And then there's a service called Amazon Music Unlimited, which is a standalone subscription, which gives you access to tens of millions of songs.
So can you give us an idea of how many people actually use Amazon Music? I mean, in the world of Spotify, in the world of Apple Music,
yeah,
you know, these are big numbers. What kind of growth are you seeing?
So we're seeing exponential growth. You know, we don't disclose our numbers publicly, but what I can say is in a very short period of time, Amazon Music has become the 3rd largest streaming service globally. And you know, just some figures, fun figures, we've seen just this year alone in 2018, listening on Alexa in the last 2 months is more than 2x what it was the year before, which was also more than 2x what it was the year before. We've actually reached a point where listening on Alexa on Amazon Music is bigger than listening on smartphones on Amazon Music, which makes us really, really different than every other music service where it's almost all about mobile.
And can you give us an idea of how much of a priority music is for Amazon? You know, we know that Amazon is investing heavily in original content, original video content, for example. How does that compare to the investment in the music business?
Well, the investment in music's gotten pretty substantial over the last several years, and it's interesting because music finds itself really at the center of 2 really important strategic priorities for Amazon. One of those is Amazon Prime, and the other is Alexa. So we sit really at the locus of those 2 things, which has made music a huge priority.
Apple is, you know, out with the HomePod now, and they've made it clear that the primary use case is for listening to music. You know, how big of a threat do you think that is to Alexa and Echo?
Well, look, I mean, we've got a great head start with Echo devices and with Alexa. We've got multiple devices at multiple price points, and the growth rate has been pretty spectacular. So I think we feel pretty good about our position, and you know, it's great to let customers have more choice in the marketplace. It makes us all better. Where
do you see sort of the growth in music listening coming from, and how do you see behavior changing as a result of these devices now, smart devices in our living rooms or in the kitchen or wherever you have your setup?
Well, you just kind of put your finger on it, which is right now music streaming today has really been all about smartphones and people walking around portable. And what's happening with smart speakers is music's coming back into the home. And what we're seeing is really a new growth segment for music streaming coming from the home. And it's reaching segments of the population that, you know, some of the other services maybe have had trouble penetrating because maybe you don't want to listen to it on your smartphone all the time.
You were recently in Washington, D.C. trying to change how artists and license holders get paid. Who did you meet with, and what exactly are you trying to accomplish?
Well, so there's a bill that's has been introduced in the House called the Music Modernization Act, and we're strongly in support of that. I met with a number of different Congress people to express our support. It's a coalition of interested parties across the industry, from music services such as ourselves to the songwriters and the publishers to the music labels. The system currently needs a lot of work. It's outdated. And what's unique is the whole industry has actually gotten together and agreed on a way forward, and now we just want to see that become legislation.
So if I'm streaming music at home via your device, how are people making money?
Every time you listen to music, the rights holders are being paid. So there are two types of rights holders in every song. There's the recording, and those are the songwriters. And we pay both of those people every time you listen to a song. So how would that change as a result of this legislation? It's going to make it a lot easier for us on the songwriter side to identify who it is that we have to pay. The biggest problem in the U.S. with songwriters is understanding who actually wrote the song or who has interest in that song, and this legislation will clarify a lot of that.
That was Amazon's Vice President of Music, Steve Boom. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. A reminder, we're live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology, weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That is all for now. This is Bloomberg.